Thank you everyone for coming. Just to give you a little bit of background information, as usual, Terrance and I have a little bit of information we prepared for you guys. We would love to get through it, give you some of the insights that we've understood from the last few years in our professional lives and in helping other people. And then after, we will stop the recording and we allow for live question and answer session. So today, we just wanted to thank everyone for coming out on a Wednesday night for our session on emotional intelligence and self-regulation. And we wanted to share with everyone a little bit further insights onto some tips, tricks, and probably putting you onto a few issues you didn't know existed that might really turn around your relationships in a very quick manner. With that being said, uh, hi, my name's Ryan, and I am a relationship engineer. So, what I do is understand how relationships fail, how they're built from the ground up, and how they're sustained. And especially today, when we're talking about like emotional intelligence, emotional regulation, just to give you guys an example, I work in business development, and I have worked with government contractors as well as other companies. And I can't tell you how many times I have had to deal with somebody who does not deserve and is not competent in the job they're in, yet they have the power to make decisions that affect me. So if I don't have the emotional intelligence to deal with this person, it's very easy for things to get out of hand and go very bad for me very quick. And I'm sure other people can relate to that struggle. So I'm excited to give a little bit more insight from my perspective on what's helped me and what has hurt people and what we can all do to change and make things just a little bit easier, a little bit better. Terrence, what about you?
Hello, I'm Terrance. I'm a former criminal profiler and criminal investigator. I worked heavily with human trafficking and crimes against children cases in the Detroit metro area, as well as some gang crimes in Michigan and Chicago. So, what I'm bringing to this conversation is a lot of firsthand experience I have because as an investigator, the tool you mostly use to get information about how to solve crimes or what's going on in somebody's life is the ability to get inside that other person's mind and for them to talk to you. You know, CSI, those shows, they make it look so much easier than it really is. Most crime scenes, there's not a bunch of DNA all over the place. You know, the first 48 is not how reality often works. It begins and ends on the human element of sitting down and connecting with people and them connecting with you and walking into that world and them voluntarily giving you information. So I'm going to talk about some of the skills that I've used in the field. Some of these skills have been used to solve cases. Other of these skills have been used to save my life in different situations. We go from there, Ryan. All right. So one of the things I want to talk about is understanding emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, also known as EQ. And a lot of times people use this word, but without an actual definition. So we're just going to go through a quick definition. And it's the ability to perceive, understand, and regulate emotions in oneself and others. So I need to be aware of my emotional state, but also I need to be able to notice the emotional states and the behaviors of other people. And so core emotional intelligence or EQ skills involves perceiving, understanding, managing, and regulating emotions effectively in daily interactions. And so like the practical application that we need to always ask ourselves is what do I want and why do I want it? So case in point, this photo right here might not mean much to most people. It looks like two, people working at McDonald's. However, the individual on the left-hand side is actually the creator of Meetup. So even after creating Meetup, the platform we're on, he took a job working at McDonald's to try to learn more about individuals and learn more about how people operate specifically in cities. Now, what often happens is we're not curious about the people around us. So, an individual like Scott, the creator of Meetup, could be standing right next to us. Somebody that has so much wealth of knowledge, somebody that could be a great person to bring in our life, but we have no idea because we often don't know the people around us. And even on a deeper level, a lot of times we're living life where we don't really understand ourselves. So that's just a quick example. We can go to the next slide. Perception versus perspective. Now, this is one of the most important facets of human behavior that is often overlooked. And it is the concept of perception versus perspective. Perception is how we interpret sensory information from our surroundings, forming or thinking decisions. So the perception might be something as simple as like this picture is those strings, are those lines? What is it? However, the importance is understanding perspective. And perspective is seeing how other people live, how other people think. What are the other ways of solving problems? And even through our own perception, is there a perspective that I'm missing out in? And that is so important because without it, it leads to reductionistic thinking, is believing there's only one or two ways to solve problems. And I want to take it to the perspective of there. If the picture is kind of small, but it's the perspective of traffic from an airplane. So the perspective of traffic from an airplane might look, oh, that looks, beautiful. It looks like art. But when we're actually in traffic, that's not fun. But changing our perspective changes the way we view things. And it opens up our minds to look at more of the world around us. And it often stops so many misunderstandings, so many issues in communication, so many breakdowns in communication. And that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about is understanding our perception and our perspective. All right, next slide. So this is a good movie. So if this is one of the first times you've ever seen our presentation, we always highlight movies or books that we think are helpful for this conversation. And one of the movies that I like that a lot of people haven't seen is The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Not the original. The original was okay. I'm talking about the remake that Ben Stiller produced. And what happened in the movie throughout the movie is you have a person who is unhappy with his existence, but he's constantly daydreaming in the beginning of the movie about the life he wished he had and the person he wished he was. And I never forgot this quote. And to set up the quote, the main character, Ben Stiller, is trying to send a woman a message on eHarmony. Good product placement in the movie. But he's trying to send her a message and he's unable to. So he calls tech support. And tech support is asking, hey, why didn't you fill out your biography? Why didn't you fill out your information? And he made the statement, I haven't really been anywhere noteworthy or mentionable. And then afterward, he says he hasn't really done anything noteworthy or mentionable. And this is something that's so important is deciding what kind of life we want to live. And the important part of that is to first decide if in this moment, in this time, in this week, are you happy where you are? And the answer to that question can then propel you to the place that you really need to go. Next slide. So here's the four-step framework for managing our minds in these moments. And this is how we express strong emotional intelligence in our life. So the first question to ask ourselves, especially if we're lost, if our mind is lost, or even if you're lost in the forest, one of the first things to ask yourself is, where are you at? And if you don't know where you're at, if you're feeling lost, then the question is, I'm lost. So next question is, where do you want to be? Next is to make a map to get to that place and then start moving in that direction. One of the biggest reasons we struggle with anxiety, especially in westernized countries like America, is that people feel lost, but they don't move. They're not moving in any direction. So likewise, if you're ever lost in the forest, if you just wake up and you're lost in the forest, what so many people do is they point in all the different directions and hypothesize about what would happen if they walked in that direction. But the conversation never goes past their minds. And you will learn way more about life by doing than by thinking. So at a certain point, we have to move in a direction. And if you find out that it's the wrong direction, at least now you found out you can go somewhere else. But the danger is to stand in one place, hoping life gets better, when in general, life doesn't get better until we get better or we make a change. And an example is if I'm in a dead end job and they're not promoting me, how long am I going to sit there waiting for people that who are not respecting me and who don't care about me and who don't see my value? How long am I going to stay there before I go somewhere else? If I'm in a relationship that I don't like the way I'm being treated, how many chances do I give someone to prove to me that they don't care about me? How many times should I deal with disrespect from a family member before I put out that this is a boundary that I need? And these are all questions that deserve a direction. Next slide. Now, this is a helpful way when we're going through anxiety, when we're trying to focus on our emotional intelligence, is to get really good at noticing our bodies. And there's a book I have, it's called Thinking Fast and Slow. And you need to slow down to speed up. And I call it the pool rule. If you're overcome with a lot of emotion and and confidence is swaying, there is no difference between confidence and comfortable. If you look at almost every major movie, if you look at every major meeting, in general, the most comfortable person is the most respected. It's the most powerful person. This is really clear if you watch a movie like Godfather. The most powerful person in the room was always the most comfortable. And one of the ways to hardwire our bodies is when we're under a lot of stress, think about swimming in a pool. The harder you swim in a pool, the more exhausted you're going to feel. A lot of times you slow down in the pool, you move slower, and now you're not going against friction. Now it's so much easier. So in those moments of high stress, we have to slow our bodies down and almost pretend that we're moving in a pool. We slow down our cadence of speech. We slow down our bodies. We relax our bodies, relax our shoulders, and just let that energy fall away from us. Because, like, and a great example of this is to watch nature. When animals in nature are panicking, that's when they make mistakes. So likewise in our own life, when we're living existences in a panic, in a fear, that's when we're most likely to make serious mistakes in our life. So that's the power of slowing down to speed up. Next slide. And this is passing it over to Ryan.
Thanks, Terrance. So, one of the things that we can use to be a little bit more aware of people's tactics or failures or their strengths around us, as well as our own, is to start thinking about whether the emotions we're feeling are valid or not. Now, we might have heard that some people say that all emotions are valid, but in reality, sometimes we react to things in ways that are irrational and that don't make sense. So, one of the things that we can do to help ourselves understand whether our emotions are leading us astray or are relevant to what we're actually going through, is thinking about, is the emotion that I'm feeling relevant and makes sense from what's actually happening right now? And does feeling this emotion bring out a positive change? So when I'm talking about feeling an emotion bringing out a positive change, this is very important. It doesn't mean that we don't feel negative emotions because we don't like to feel them. It means that if I messed up and I felt guilty about it, or I feel shameful about doing something that I shouldn't have, that I should feel that way. And feeling that way helps me change what I'm doing in the future to make up for my mistakes. It doesn't mean that feeling guilt or shame is a negative emotion and let's just never feel it even if we need to. But it also means that if it's a positive emotion like gratefulness, feeling happy or grateful or appreciative, for instance, or resilient in the face of great misfortune, is that the more that I feel it, the better the outcome it is for me. So, of course, within reason. And our emotions, if they're valid, are usually being centered around the facts and looking for what the truth in the situation is. And we're able to regulate our emotions. Meaning, if I should feel happy, or I should feel angry, or it makes sense that I feel sad about something, is it extreme and over the top and uncontrollable, or is it something that I can control to with a certain extent? But what happens is if we not understanding and we're not looking for the truth in a situation, we're not able to regulate our emotions, they become problematic. And what that looks like is not being able to understand why we're feeling the way we're feeling, can't put a finger on it, can't logically reason it, and it oftentimes comes from our opinions. And it's something that happens very fast, meaning we lose control of our emotions. So it comes from just being triggered. Something, someone, some outside event happens that we're not in control of, and all of a sudden our emotions go haywire. And the more we lean into those emotions, the more chaotic things become and the more problematic it gets really fast. And those emotions are usually centered around us. Somebody wronged me. I got into a car crash and somebody ruined my day and ruined my car. And, thankfully I'm okay, but now things just escalate more and more and more. Getting out of the car, yelling at them, right? Screaming at them, starting to call them names, blowing everything out of proportion. I mean, I have unfortunately hit somebody in the past and I paid for it and I apologized. But even with that and the ability that they were able to drive their car away and everybody was fine and it was a minor accident, everything was being paid for, the 10 minutes that it changed their schedule was the end of the world for them. So are our feelings valid and making sense, and can we control them, or are they actually bringing us more problems? It becomes very easy in an argument where we want to feel right to get angry that somebody isn't understanding us and then try and beat them into submission with our emotions. And we could be right and the other person could be right. And like what Terrance talked about, perspective is so important. So if we can understand and control our emotions, it will actually help us reach somebody and build a relationship with them from a place of better understanding a lot quicker, rather than letting our emotions get the better of us and feeling like we're always fighting or opposing somebody. So, in talking about regulation and valid emotions versus problematic emotions, we need to think about, when I want to feel happy or when I feel angry or sad and I want to feel differently, am I always going to outside sources? Am I always going to say, I need to go to a certain place because that'll make me happy, and I need to listen to a certain song because that'll make me happy? And if I don't talk to this person, if I don't talk to my best friend today, then there's no way that I'm going to be secure about what's going on. And what happens is all of the things that you don't control are now what you're saying has control over the emotion. And so like if your friend came to you and they started complaining about something that might seem quite normal, like, hey, somebody hit my mailbox again, and I'm so angry about it. But instead of solving the problem, there's no way that I'm going to feel good about this, not even for the next 3 or 4 days until I go get a drink at the bar. And you're like, okay, I get it. Something bad happened to you. But why are we still mad about it 3, 4 days later without a way to actually feel differently? Like if our whole day is ruined by one event and there's no way we can feel differently, then we're saying that everyone else is in control of my emotions, but not me. So internal regulation real is understanding what may cause you to feel certain ways and being secure in yourself so that you understand how you can change your own emotions and also putting a plan in place for when you need to regulate your emotions and understand when to separate it from our decisions. And if we're not careful and we only react to things emotionally without being able to take a step back and make decisions based on searching for more information and wanting to understand something rather than saying my emotion is right no matter what, this chart on the right shows how quickly we can get into a place that's actually problematic. So we might be calm and then a trigger happens and our emotions get heightened. And then we get a little agitated. But once we get agitated, once we get disturbed from our normal baseline because something happened that we didn't expect, if we don't regulate it then and there, it moves very quickly to a peak of emotion before needing to de-escalate so much before we can feel normal again. And I mean, family, the people that are closest to us are the people that somehow find a way to get on our nerves more than anybody else. And if you've ever had a fight with a sibling or a parent or a very close friend and you've actually gotten to that peak, even after the fight's over, it takes a while to actually kind of feel okay again. And so, what we're trying to do and we're wanting to do is instead of being a part of the problem, even if somebody else comes to us acting this way, by dialing it back just a little bit and even wanting to understand if somebody is, trying to start a conflict with us or there's a problem, simply just trying to figure out why before we start getting angry and throwing insults or start feeling like the end of the world is happening. If we can pull back before we accelerate it, believe it or not, all of the times we might have thought in our head about the worst case scenario and getting ourselves ready for what somebody's going to do and what someone's going to say when a situation escalates, you'll be pleasantly surprised that by dialing it back before we accelerate it, we never have to de-escalate it. And we might actually be able to build a closer relationship with the people around us rather than building a history of contributing to fights that kind of get out of hand because it's very difficult for most people to kind of forgive and forget the past and move on. It is very difficult. So the more that we can mitigate problems happening, we have a huge advantage over other people in being able to build and maintain those long-term relationships. Now, what can also happen is we might have a valid emotion. A friend might have a valid emotion. And I work with this all the time at work, right? You expect somebody to turn something in. You expect somebody to show up to a meeting. You expect somebody to deliver something that you're waiting on. And do they give you an explanation of why things didn't go well when they didn't turn it up and they didn't show it in, or are they using an excuse? And the main difference comes down to a place of understanding, but taking accountability versus a place of shunning accountability entirely. So, for instance, if if a friend is suffering from alcoholism or suffering from another type of addiction, when they're trying to explain to you perhaps how they got that addiction and why they're addicted to it, that is an explanation. It comes from a realm of trying to understand how they got there in the first place, even if it is their fault. It's still an understanding of how we got there, but we can use that information to change the outcome. Whereas an excuse says, but it's their fault and it's not mine. So when an employee or your coworker is needs to turn in work for you that you're waiting on, and it doesn't get done and they've had 2 weeks, uh, an excuse looks like, oh, but all these things came up and I waited till last minute and I swear I was going to turn it in like 10 minutes ago and then I get an emergency call. And the thing is like, okay, that's an excuse because you're shirking the responsibility of having done it throughout the entire time frame. And an explanation looks more like, hey, I really thought I had more time. I prioritized other things first. And unfortunately, things didn't go to my plan, but it's my fault. But I just wanted to explain what happened. It wasn't because I just didn't care. But they're still taking responsibility. So another way this looks like of explanations versus excuses, I mean, if a friend comes to you and is talking about, their list of relationship problems, because we've all got friends, family with relationship problems, and we know, unfortunately, a lot of people have been cheated on. And an explanation of the way they feel is saying, man, I was cheated on in the past. They didn't always tell me where they were going. Sometimes they got in a lot later than usual. And so I feel like when people don't tell me where, when my significant other doesn't really tell me everywhere they're going, I kind of get paranoid about it. They're explaining the way that they feel, but there's a sense of ownership and responsibility, but they're understanding where it comes from. An excuse is now whatever behavior comes from that, it's everybody else's fault and they have to deal with it and I'm okay. So what that may look like is your buddy comes to you and goes, man, I've been cheated on so many times in the past that I made sure that my girlfriend, my wife, whoever, I've got a tracker on them. They have to tell me everywhere they go. And I yell at them sometimes when they forget, but it's okay because I was cheated on in the past and I want to make sure it doesn't happen again. So instead of explaining the way they feel, but understanding that that doesn't mean they get to act the way they're acting. They're making an excuse for the way they're acting and trying to say it's everyone else's fault. In my past, it's the fault that I'm acting. And if we take just 1 second to look at ourselves and say, you know what? Somebody wronged me in the past, and this is why I'm a lot more careful choosing friends, or I'm a lot more careful interacting with people in a certain way. That is absolutely valid. But if we make excuses for other people, but hold ourselves accountable, rather than holding everybody else accountable and just making excuses for ourselves, this is one of the ways that we can quickly make friends with a whole lot of people and reach people further because when everyone else around us is pointing fingers at everyone else and we're the only ones willing to give people the benefit of the doubt but holding ourselves accountable, you become that valuable friend. You become that valuable partner that is willing to give people enough leeway to have faults in their life rather than being the person who's always seeking out to point the problem in somebody else. And I know that is very philosophical, and it may take a little bit of time for us to look within ourselves, but this is one of the often reasons that relationships break up because people point the fingers at each other rather than helping each other and moving forward. And emotional maturity sometimes can look like shutting down. So when we are in the face of something that makes us so angry, so furious, or so uncomfortable, and we choose not to react, it can be mistaken for maturity, or it can be mistaken for emotional shutdown. And the main difference, and I want to make this very clear, emotional maturity is choosing not to react and seeking out more information. And also understanding that there are times and places where our anger, where our curiosity, where our sadness, where we want to be extremely critical of someone and let them know what they've done wrong actually won't help the situation. And therefore, that's why we choose not to react. Whereas emotional shutting down can look like, you're honestly trying to help um, you're trying to help a friend out. You're trying to tell them, hey, I'm really sorry this thing happened to you. I'm really sorry your car broke down. I'm sorry that you ran out of gas. Hey, I just want to ask, like, do you know that, we were driving on 60, we're driving on a highway and there wasn't a gas station for 100 miles? Like, why didn't we stop at the last one? And then the person might just shut down if they think something is their fault, meaning they will not react. Instead, they become unresponsive or unreasonable, and nothing you tell them and nothing that would make the situation better, despite it being a fact. Like, hey, I called a friend and they're coming by and they're gonna, fill up our car with gas and we're gonna continue going. Don't worry about it. It's just a temporary setback.
That
Doesn't matter, it won't change their mood.
or
And this might include wallowing, marinating, or fuming in their emotions without resolution to it. And it comes from the inability to understand, not wanting to cope with, or even regulate what they're feeling beyond the normal times to process it. So, our emotional maturity is choosing not to react, either because we don't know everything about a situation and we want to understand what's going on, or we understand reacting won't help and it might make things worse. And the more that we do that, the more we're going to realize we're becoming more like the people that we look up to, that when we failed in life, when we made a mistake, maybe there were times that we got very angry as a kid. We got angry and yelled at our parents. And instead of shouting right back or becoming physically abusive or punishing us to no end, they took a second and actually talked to us about what was going on. And if we're that person for other people, we're going to be the valuable person in a relationship. We're going to be the person who is helping move a relationship forward and build this foundation of trust and acceptance and getting closer to somebody else. And I'm going to be very frank. There's an endless number of reasons in day-to-day life to just get angry. And the less angry we are, and the more we realize that, getting angry or showing that type of emotion isn't going to change the situation, we're going to live so much happier lives. I already used an example, so I'm going to skip that. So at the end of the day, a lot of what breaks up relationships and makes it very difficult to build a bond and a deep understanding with somebody is the fact that we overstep boundaries, or our own boundaries seem to be overstepped, or even we don't have boundaries and we don't know they were overstepped until we get angry or uncomfortable. And so, in moving backwards from that, if we need to set boundaries, we need to understand what our needs are. And a lot of the times, what tells us our needs or signifies a need that is unmet is the emotion that is brought forth. So maybe I might be a little bit sensitive about my wife being critical of my own mother. And that wasn't something that I put down in the relationship as a, hey, this is a rule. I don't want you to talk bad about my mom, especially like off to the side, right? But if I feel bad about the way that my wife and by the way, she doesn't, but this is hypothetical. If my wife were to talk bad about my mom and it made me feel uncomfortable, or about a friend perhaps, or it was very critical about something that I enjoy, like a hobby, I might need to take a step back and say, hey, I'm feeling bad. Why? I have a need. What is that need? I need to feel secure or set a certain boundary to make sure the way that we're operating is healthy and okay. Then I might communicate that to my wife and say, with all due respect, I completely understand that you have a problem or you see things in this way. But before we go forward, I want you to understand I don't like the way that you're talking about your mother-in-law being my mom. And if you have a problem, I'd like you to do this instead. But hey, what's going on? Talk to me. Instead of, right, getting being unable to regulate that emotion and getting really mad that somebody or something I care about was insulted and making things worse. So whenever we're feeling emotions and we feel like we don't have control over them, just having that self-awareness to reflect on why it might be happening is so important because then we'll start finding the reason why this is happening. And now we know how to make our life a lot more stable and a lot happier. But even more so than that is when we figure it out, we can lead by example. And the people around us, when they learn from us as an example, all of our relationships get better. And the people who don't want to get better, we start to understand that perhaps that they don't want to, and they don't want to do the work that we're doing. And that's okay. And that's part of the emotional intelligence is understanding that not everyone is going to be at the same place on their journey as we are, nor does everyone want to take that journey. And we don't need to take it personally. We can simply say, they want something different from me, and I'm going to be on my way. And this happens in almost every situation that we may have to deal with strangers. We're expecting to be treated a certain way, or we're hoping to be treated a certain way, and that doesn't happen all the time. So just being able to say, you know what? Uh, they're who they are. I am who I am, and I'm secure in the way that I feel, and I can go on with my day without it being ruined is an absolutely wonderful, full feeling. With that being said, thank you so much for making it out today on a Wednesday night. Terrance and I work really hard every week. We're now trying to do it once or twice a week to get you this content, and we really truly hope that this is helping you all out. So we're at the very end of our presentation. Terrance is going to finish us off of what's coming next and a couple of announcements, and then we'll stop the recording and we'll do our live
Yeah.
question and answer session. So, what do we have going on in the future, Terrance?
Okay, perfect. So, oh, I need the slide.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Oh yeah,
My bad, man.
I'm good, but I don't remember it like that. So, our relationship improvement book is still scheduled to come out in September. The next event we have is going to be mature dating. So specifically people in their older years, 40s, 50s, 60s, even 70s or 80s, how to get back out in the relationship world. What are some things that we can do and patterns that we have seen that have been very successful? Next one we have is smart love after heartbreak. So people coming from divorces, people coming from toxic relationships. How can we move forward without letting the chains of our past hold us back? And that's really important because it's easy to get hardened if we don't look at our past as lessons. So we're going to be talking about that. The next one is going to be specifically something that was asked about, and it was for parents. So we're going to talk about protecting kids from comparison, chaos, and consumerism, just certain things that are going on, apps that are targeting children, influencers that are targeting children, and just stuff that a lot of parents don't know about. I also want to touch on something because this is our 21st presentation. We started in February, and this was actually the first presentation we had where we had a legitimate Zoom issue where Zoom would not let people in, and I had to actually call Zoom. And so I had to get off the call. So for the last 20 to 25 minutes, I'm trying to talk to somebody. There's a language barrier, and we couldn't bring people in. But this is part of emotional intelligence, is how do we deal with problems? How do we deal with things not working out? And a very important part of emotional intelligence is good faith. If we assume when things don't go our way that the other person is bad or they're acting badly, then we don't give them help. We don't give them mercy. We don't give them um the the fairness that we would want. Because all of us, especially anybody that's used Zoom or any of these platforms or any time, any technical job, things work until they don't work. But it's all about how we deal with it, how we deal with the problem. And I just want you everybody to know is while Ryan was talking, the entire leadership team was trying to figure out what the heck is going on because no, we're not getting a prompt. We're just locked out. But I don't know his name, but somebody out there solved it for us, and we appreciate that. But that's where, this is extremely important because what happens is if we believe people are working in bad faith, what often when we have relationships, when the person doesn't call us back when we think they're gonna call us back, do we assume the worst? Do we assume the worst in other people? Or do we look at their track record and say, what's going on here? I don't think people would intentionally mess up my life unless they've proven that they're that type of person. But if they haven't shown that they're that type of person and my safety's not at risk, many times a little bit of credence, little bit of mercy goes really a long way. Because your average person is trying so hard to just get through the day. I don't care if they're a C-suite level executive or working, at Amazon. Almost everybody I talk to is trying to do the best they can in this world. And we're a lot closer together than we are far away from each other. And with that, we can go ahead and close the recorded section and open it up for questions if anybody has questions.